Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the 1997 comedy George of the Jungle. And in this film, San Francisco heiress Ursula Stanhope is touring Uganda when she and her snooty fiance Lyle Vandergroot become the targets of a hungry lion. Lyle immediately shows his true colours and attempts to flee, leaving Ursula in the lurch, but fortunately for her, she is saved by the king of the jungle, the great white ape. No, not Tarzan. George. Marooned in the jungle as a toddler, George has grown up in the depths of Uganda entirely without human contact, but not without friends. He shares his treehouse home with a sapient talking gorilla named Ape, and has a big peanut-loving poochie as a pet in the shape of Shep. Shep's an elephant, but acts like a dog. Acts like the dog that George believes him to be. George is instantly smitten by Ursula, the first woman he's ever seen, and since he is brave, generous, and not exactly hard on the eyes, Ursula soon feels similar stirrings of affection. But this is a movie, and the course of true love never runs smooth in such things. So, of course, Lyle Vandergroot catches up to George and Ursula, this time in the company of some very unsavoury characters. They immediately spot the monetary value of a talking gorilla. I mean, you'd make a fortune off something like that, and try to seize Ape as a means of making their fortunes, which triggers a series of zany misadventures. Can the jungle man and the girl from the big city find true love and keep their eclectic collection of friends safe? Well, I mean, you probably already know the answer to that. This is a comedy, not a tragedy. So the original George of the Jungle was an animated TV series that aired in 1967 for just 17 episodes. It was supposed to run a bit longer than that, but it had cost overruns. Somehow, despite that relatively limited number of episodes, it remained in the public consciousness, probably due to reruns in syndication. Weird Al Yankovic did a cover of the theme song in 1985. To the best of my knowledge, it remains the only straight cover that he's ever released on an album. And then in the mid-1990s, Disney somehow decided that, spending $50 million on a feature film adaptation would be a good investment. Hollywood is a crazy place. And it's made crazier by the fact that Disney were right. George of the Jungle became the 10th highest grossing film in the US in 1997, and the first major box office success for its leading man, Brendan Fraser. So the film obviously worked for audiences, and I was a part of that audience. I saw the film on the big screen in Australia when it came out. So, why did it work out so well? Well, one key to the film's success is in the casting. I've already mentioned star Brendan Fraser, who ably captures the affable charm and good-natured enthusiasm that was key to the role of George. Though Fraser is now best known for his work as the somewhat more savvy action hero in the Mummy franchise, these well-meaning fish-out-of-water characters was something of a recurring theme for him in the 90s. He'd previously portrayed a frozen caveman thawed out in the modern day in 1992's Encino Man, and in 1999's Blast from the Past, he starred as a man who grew up in a three-person fallout shelter that was established in the 50s and emerged to find something very different to the apocalyptic wasteland he'd expected. But narratively speaking, there's something to the idea that a hero is only good as the villains they beat. And on that front, Thomas Hayden Church was a great choice to portray the antagonist. Lyle Vandergroot could easily have come across as nothing more than a buffoon, and defeating a buffoon just isn't very impressive. Fortunately, Church is capable of a considerable breadth of character work, and he does a very good job here of balancing the comical and the capable in Vandergroot. The character is cowardly in nature and physically no match for George, but he's also sly and conniving and able to call on useful connections. Church is a lot of fun to watch and to see him get his just desserts as Lyle Vandergroot. It's a really good job of the casting, basically. Now, this is a very silly movie. I mean, you probably figured that out already from the mention of a talking ape and an elephant that thinks it's a dog. But just in case the point somehow eluded you up until this point, this is a very silly movie. And from my perspective, that's absolutely a positive for it. George of the Jungle is the lightest of light entertainment, but so was the original animated show. As much as I am surprised that this movie turned out to be a financially successful property to resurrect, I would have been even more surprised if some kind of postmodern deconstruction would have found a big audience. I mean, I could absolutely see a show like Robot Chicken making a 3-minute sketch about the real life of George of the Jungle, and it would probably be howlingly funny in a deeply, deeply twisted way. But as far as a feature film goes, leaning into the goofy, over-the-top slapstick nonsense and absurdity of the cartoon was absolutely the right way to go, at least in my opinion. A more serious film would have just looked like a Tarzan movie, which is something we actually got in 1998, the year after this, with the hilariously miscast Tarzan and the Lost City, and then doing some kind of grim and gritty re-envisaging would have just ceased to be recognisably George of the Jungle at all. Sometimes it's fine for a film just to be lightweight family entertainment, and this movie knows that and embraces it. It has simple goals and it pursues them without distraction. I think it's a smart choice to keep the movie very focused on what it is. Now, when you're doing a goofy narrative with far-fetched elements, such as talking apes and elephants that think they're a dog, it's very easy to lean on that goofiness as a crutch and just ladle on more and more contrivances to write yourself out of a jam. Oh, well, if the audience has accepted that, they'll accept this. Now, this is a risky strategy. Sooner or later, your audience's suspension of disbelief, or at very least their suspension of disbelief that the good guys might not win, will snap. It doesn't matter what hole you put the hero in; you're just going to reveal some new power or some lucky accident to save them, and you've made that so obvious I can no longer pretend not to know it. So you need to not do that, or you'll run the risk of the audience going, well, clearly you're just going to write whatever nonsense you need to write to get out of this. And George of the Jungle does a good job of avoiding it. It introduces its ridiculous elements early on, lets the rest of the cast acknowledge how far-fetched they are. George himself, of course, has no idea how abnormal they are, because to him they are normal. And then just as quickly establishes that George isn't invincible and that his ability to break the normal rules of the world do have limits. Humans, for instance, seem immune to George's very positive expectations of everybody he meets. George can make an elephant behave like a dog, but just by expecting it, but he can't make Lyle Vandergroup behave like a decent person. For all that it's a very silly script, it's also a smart one. So that's George of the Jungle. I think it is what it sets out to be, and it does it really well. Next time, a whistle-stop tour through 3 alleged drive-in classics of the 70s. More by accident than design, we'll be travelling through the whole decade, starting with The Manipulator from 1971, then Katie's Passion from 1975, and Spare Parts from 1979. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.